Welcome to Golden Blue, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to send gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. Hey, you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. Well, don't worry, Pac-12 fans. Your conference isn't the only conference that's in trouble. Of course, a while back, we heard that the Florida State athletic director and the Clemson athletic director came out and said, hey, we want unequal revenue share. We make more money for the ACC than anybody else in this conference, and we're not getting our fair share of the pie. In fact, Florida State took it a step further, and they took a legal team to look into how much it would cost for Florida State to get out of the ACC altogether. Now, the number that he came up with is a little debatable because it came up with $120 million. A lot of people think that that's just the exit fee, but in order to get out of the grant rights and the ACC altogether, it would be more around $500 million. So those two were the first presidents to come out. Now, what did I say when it happened? I said, watch out for North Carolina and watch out for the Miami Hurricanes. And guess what? That's what we're looking at. We are talking about North Carolina and the Miami Hurricanes joining the fight for unequal revenue share in the ACC. This could be bad news for the ACC. The beginning of the end. Unequal revenue share is always a sign that there's trouble in paradise. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Golden Blue. I do know that Nevada and Cincinnati are on their way as far as mini helmet representation. So get your team represented here on Golden Blue. First, we're going to look at WRAL Sports Fan. Their headline reads, UNC's Cunningham joins call for unequal revenue distribution among ACC schools. North Carolina has officially joined the fight, or the cause, whatever you want to call it. Tallahassee Democrat headline reads this, FSU joined by other ACC heavy hitters in call for updated conference revenue share. They go on to say this, North Carolina nudges its way to the table. On Tuesday, North Carolina Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham said in a radio interview, the Tar Heels also deserve more of the conference's financial pie compared to other league programs. He joined FSU, Clemson, and Miami Hurricanes by publicly voicing for unequal revenue sharing among ACC schools. Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, and a few others feel the same way, believing they deserve more money. Whispers say the 14-member football room is nearly split in regards to unequal revenue sharing, but how it should be done remains a 1,000-piece puzzle. Finally, Tomahawk Nation says this, Knowles News, unequal revenue distribution in ACC gets another strong supporter in UNC. So yes, North Carolina is now a part of the unequal revenue share fight, cause, whatever you want to call it. And according to this, so is Miami. I haven't seen any news on Miami, so that's news to me. Maybe I can do a separate video on that, or maybe I can just include them on this video. So for me, it did make sense that Florida State and Clemson came out and said, hey, look at the numbers. We make more for the ACC than any of these other teams. We deserve more. In fact, Florida State said we make about 15% of the cut for the ACC, and we're only getting 7%. Clemson is right there with them, about 15% for the ACC, and only getting back 7%. North Carolina is a little bit of a head-scratcher because, yes, we've been hearing about North Carolina since Oklahoma and Texas decided to join the SEC. And then we heard rumors that the ACC might be splitting apart, and we heard that it was Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Virginia that were the top candidates for the SEC. And ever since then, we've been hearing North Carolina after North Carolina after North Carolina all over the place. Problem is, with the presentation that the Florida State athletic director presented, that really doesn't make sense. Number one and number two, absolutely. Florida State, number one, from 2014 to 2022, with an average of 3.17 million viewers per game, not counting games that are on the ACC network. Clemson right there at number two. Their average was 3.08 million per game. Number three was the Miami Hurricanes, so they make sense, 2.04 million per game. But what doesn't make sense is North Carolina. Where are they at? Oh, I have to go all the way down to number 11. North Carolina at number 11, averaging 1.57 million in viewership per game. What? That doesn't make any sense. Who is that fourth team under Miami? Louisville. I've been talking about Louisville and how they are more valuable than people realize. Louisville is the last team to average more than 2 million views per game, right at 2.02 million. So one Florida State at 3.17 million, 2 Clemson at $3.08 million, 3 Miami Hurricanes at $2.04 million, and 4 Louisville at $2.02 million. And then all the way down at number 11 was North Carolina at $1.57 million. Teams above North Carolina in viewership in football. You have Virginia Tech at number 5, $1.92 million. Number 6 is Syracuse at $1.76 million per game. The thing about Syracuse is, though, their football is way down. They actually have the largest fan base in the ACC if you're not counting Notre Dame. So that 1.76 is actually really impressive because Syracuse football has been a train wreck. Yes, they've gotten to a couple of bowls. That's about it. So for them to be at number 6, that's impressive. And they have great potential because they do have the largest fan base in the ACC. So Syracuse might be one of those other teams that weren't mentioned that also want unequal revenue share. Number 7 was Georgia Tech at $1.70 million. That shocked me. Number 8 was Virginia at $1.68 million per game. Number 9, Pitt at $1.65 million per game. Tied with Pitt at number 9 was NC State at $1.65 million. And then number 11, North Carolina at $1.57 million. So the teams that have a bigger argument than North Carolina as far as the viewership goes, Louisville definitely, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Pitt, and NC State. North Carolina all the way down there at number 11. So even though I predicted, and I did predict, it wasn't just one of these speculation videos, I predicted, hey, look for North Carolina and the Miami Hurricanes to come out and voice their opinion on unequal revenue share. Lo and behold, it happens. Miami makes sense, but honestly, North Carolina doesn't make sense as far as them wanting unequal revenue share. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't know about the ACC is that any decision and all decisions go through Tobacco Road. So North Carolina, Duke, NC State, Wake Forest, they have more power than anybody else. Specifically, North Carolina and Duke. They have the most of anybody. You can throw in NC State and Wake Forest because they're in the state of North Carolina. But basically, it comes down to North Carolina and Duke. So maybe this is just North Carolina throwing their weight around saying, yes, everything has to go through Tobacco Road. So we think since we have that much power, we should have unequal revenue share because the numbers don't support that. Louisville has a much bigger argument than North Carolina for unequal revenue share. Maybe they are one of the unnamed teams not listed. Number 5, Virginia Tech. Much bigger argument than North Carolina. Maybe they're also one of the teams not mentioned. Syracuse, much bigger argument. Maybe they're one of the teams not mentioned. Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pitt has a better argument than North Carolina. And then, of course, their arch rival, NC State, has a better argument than North Carolina. And just for curiosity's sake, if you're wondering, West Virginia would fall between number 5, number 6, right below Virginia Tech, right above Syracuse. West Virginia averages around 1.86 million views per game when it is televised. So West Virginia, if they were in this particular situation in the ACC, they might be one of the teams that would have an argument for unequal revenue share. Just thought I'd throw that out there because y'all know I've been talking about West Virginia to the ACC for a long time, although I have dropped it for a while. And now I don't even want West Virginia to go to the ACC because the ACC, it looks like it's about to fall apart. Unequal revenue share is always a telltale sign that a conference is in turmoil. And we are seeing the ACC fall apart at the seams. First, Florida State comes out, then Clemson comes out. Apparently, Miami came out, and now North Carolina. And then some unnamed teams are also in this fight. I would venture to say that Louisville is probably in there. Virginia Tech, Syracuse, maybe Georgia Tech. I don't know. NC State. There are some other teams. This is not good. According to the argument in the actual room where the presidents talk about this stuff, the room is actually split 50-50. Well, I'm going to assume 50-50. It's split nonetheless. Some want unequal revenue share, the others do not. So it's basically the lower brands that don't want unequal revenue share because they know they wouldn't get the better cut. And it's the bigger brands that do want unequal revenue share. The thing that really makes me scratch my head is North Carolina joining the fight because if you look at the TV viewership, they're actually not one of the top teams. And I understand the basketball argument, but what drives conference realignment in these TV deals? It's football. Basketball doesn't factor into this, so it really doesn't make any sense why North Carolina is doing this. Even though I predicted it. I just know how big the ego of North Carolina is. So I knew this was going to happen. So it looks like the ACC is in some turmoil and maybe some decisions need to be made about unequal revenue share. Otherwise, maybe we're going to see a majority of teams come together and vote down the grant of rights and dissolve them. That way anybody can go wherever they want. And they can make more money either in the SEC or the Big Ten, maybe even the Big 12 as well. Because I think 4 teams could go to the SEC, 4 teams could go to the Big Ten, and the Big 12 could also grab 4 teams to strengthen the east side of the conference. So this is actually a good thing for the Big 12. They want turmoil to be in the ACC because they can strengthen their east side of the conference after they strengthen the west side, because right now they're focused on the Pac-12. So they're going to get the Pac-12 teams, and then they're going to hope that the ACC continues to fight amongst themselves as far as unequal revenue share, and then they can get the teams that they want, because the SEC won't be interested in Louisville. The Big Ten won't be interested in Louisville. That would be a huge pickup for the Big 12. The same as Syracuse, Pitt. Maybe they can also get lucky and grab either a Virginia Tech or an NC State. But the bottom line right now is there is turmoil in the ACC, teams wanting unequal revenue share because they're just not getting paid enough. I guarantee you that if they had the TV deal of the Big Ten or the SEC, they wouldn't be clamoring for unequal revenue share. It's because they have a bad TV deal. The same reason why Oregon and Washington want unequal revenue share in the Pac-12 as well. It's because the number on the TV deal is so low. That's what all this comes down to. Two bad TV deals. So y'all let me know in the comment section. Number one, how many teams do you think eventually join this fight in unequal revenue share? Number two, do you think this ends up being the reason why majority of teams come together and vote down grant of rights and it dissolves and the ACC teams can go wherever they want? Number three, who do you think's in more trouble? The ACC or the Pac-12? Maybe the tiebreaker is the grant of rights and everybody's saying how ironclad they are. I don't know. I'm interested to see what you think about this situation. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.